everyone, and welcome. Get ready because today we're diving into a topic I know you're going to love: goal setting. We found this really cool blog post, well, more like a treasure trove of ideas, really on listellian.com, and I couldn't wait to unpack it with you. The post is called 50 Journal Prompts for Those Exploring Goal Setting Approaches. A bit of a mouthful, right? But trust me, it's full of gems. It was written by Clara Penrose and published on April 29th of this year. And it's interesting. Lasallian also seems to sell journals. So this post is like a clever way to get you thinking about, hey, maybe I need a new journal for all these awesome goal-setting ideas. Smart, right? Anyway, I know you all are busy people, and the last thing you need is information overload. So today's deep dive is all about extracting those aha moments, those immediately actionable tips, the surprising insights that make you rethink things just a bit. Okay, so the first section of prompts is all about the goal-setting basics, and I thought we could jump right in with prompt 3. What small step can you take today towards that goal? Because let's be real, we've all been there. We set these big, hairy, audacious goals, and then, bam, life happens. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's so true. That overwhelm is real.
Yeah.
One thing I find fascinating about this prompt is the psychology behind it. There's actually a ton of research on something called the Zeigarnik effect. Essentially, it means our brains are wired to remember unfinished tasks more than completed ones. So even by taking a tiny step towards your goal, like today, right now even, you create this loop in your brain that makes it harder to ignore. It's like subconsciously nudging yourself toward what you want to achieve.
Whoa. Seriously, I had no idea about that. So it's like
Yeah.
we're actually like rewiring our brains just by taking action. That's wild. Okay, this next one, prompt 6, really spoke to me. Who can help you achieve your goal? And I think it's especially relevant these days. We're constantly bombarded with messages about being independent, like the lone wolf hustling away. It's almost like we're made to feel bad for needing help.
It's true, and it's such a misconception. Think about it. Athletes, they have entire teams supporting them. Coaches, trainers, nutritionists, even massage therapists. Nobody achieves greatness in a vacuum. So why do we think we have to reach our goals alone? Having a support system, whether it's a mentor, a trusted friend, or even an online community, can be a game changer.
I love that. It's all about teamwork, right? And it doesn't have to be like super formal or anything. Just someone to check in with, hold you accountable, or even just celebrate those small wins with. And speaking of small wins, that brings us to prompt 9, which I thought was just brilliant. How can you celebrate small victories on your way to the big goal? I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in the end goal that we forget to appreciate the journey. It's like that old saying, enjoy the journey, not just the destination. But it's easier said than done, right? Celebrating those small victories is like giving yourself permission to acknowledge your progress, to savor those wins. And it doesn't have to be anything big or fancy either. It could be as simple as like treating yourself to your favorite coffee after a productive work session, or taking a break to do something you enjoy. Whatever helps you stay motivated and reinforces that positive momentum.
It's like giving yourself a little burst of dopamine along the way. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about your goal-setting strategy, which is the next section in this blog post. I thought prompt 1 in this section was particularly interesting. What time of day are you most productive for working on your goals? I'm a morning person through and through, but I have friends who swear by late-night work sessions. Like, how do they even function before noon? I don't know. It's fascinating how differently our brains seem to be wired.
It really is remarkable. And it highlights the importance of understanding your own personal rhythms and energy levels. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to productivity. This prompt is all about encouraging us to become more self-aware. Like, are you a night owl or an early bird? Do you thrive in short bursts of focused work or longer stretches? Once you figure that out, you can optimize your schedule to align with your natural tendencies.
Absolutely. It's about working smarter, not harder. Okay, this next one, prompt 4, is a question I think we can all relate to. How do you prioritize multiple goals? I mean, really, who isn't juggling a million things these days? It's like the default setting for modern life.
It really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Wow.
And, so many productivity hacks and tips sort of gloss over this, but this prompt forces you to get real with yourself. Like, what really matters? Are we saying yes to too many things? Or are we being strategic about where we're putting our energy, making sure it aligns with, what we actually care about?
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in that do-it-all mentality, like we have to be firing on all cylinders all the time. But the reality is sometimes saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices, like how are we actually spending our time, our energy? There are a million different systems out there for this. Ranking systems, time blocking, the Eisenhower matrix. But the core of it is finding What works for you? What helps you stay focused on the things that truly matter?
The Eisenhower matrix, that's my jam. Helps me separate the urgent from the important. Speaking of important, this next prompt, prompt 8, got me thinking. How do you balance long-term and short-term goals? I don't know about you, but I struggle with this all the time. It's like you get so caught up in the day-to-day, you lose sight of the bigger picture, Or you're so busy dreaming big that you never actually take those first steps. It's tough.
Oh, it is a balancing act, for sure. Have you ever heard that quote? I think it's a Chinese proverb that says, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today." It speaks to that tension, right? Got to have that long-term vision, but also be willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work in the present.
I love that. So how do we actually strike that balance then? Because it's one thing to say it, but actually living it, that's the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I find helpful is to think of short-term goals as like stepping stones that lead to your long-term aspirations. So let's say your big dream, your long-term goal is to write a novel, right? A short-term goal could be something like, I'm going to commit to writing for 30 minutes every day no matter what, or I'm going to join a writing group for accountability. Each of those small steps, they move you closer to that ultimate goal of writing the novel, but they also provide a sense of accomplishment along the way.
Right. Instead of looking at this massive, daunting mountain, you're just focused on taking that next step. I love that. Okay, are we ready to dive into the challenges section? This part's called Goal Setting Challenges for You. And I'll be honest, some of these prompts are a little confronting in a good way. Like prompt 1, write about a time when you failed to meet a goal and what you learned from it. Oof, that one hit me right where it hurts.
Oh yeah, that's a powerful one. It's so easy to get trapped in that shame spiral when we don't achieve a goal. But this prompt, it's like it flips the script on us. It's not about dwelling on the failure itself. It's about like mining it for the lessons, So what went wrong? What could you have done differently? And maybe even more importantly, what did you learn about yourself in the process?
It's about turning that failure into fuel for growth. I love that reframing.
Exactly. It's all about cultivating that growth mindset, that belief that your abilities aren't fixed, that you can always learn and grow from your experiences, even the messy ones.
Okay, let's talk distractions. Prompt 2 asks, how do you handle distractions that interfere with your goals? I mean, is this not the struggle of our time? Like, our phones are practically designed to hijack our attention spans.
It's true. Social media, the news, that constant fear of missing out, it's a recipe for derailing even the most focused person.
Yeah.
The key, I think, is to be proactive about it. Identify your personal kryptonite, those things that tend to pull you off track, and then experiment with different strategies for managing them.
Okay, so give us some strategies. What are some things that actually work?
Well, it really depends on the person and the specific distraction. But some popular tactics include things like the Pomodoro technique, that's a time management method, or creating a dedicated workspace free from distractions, even if it's just a corner of your kitchen table. And then there are things like website blockers to limit social media time, or even just practicing mindfulness to become more aware of when your mind starts to wander.
Oh, those are all great tips. But sometimes it's not even external distractions that are the problem, right? Sometimes it's us. We get in our own way.
Oh, 100%. We can be our own worst critics, our own worst enemies sometimes. And that leads perfectly into prompt 5, which asks, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed by your goals? We've all been there. We set these amazing, ambitious goals, and then the reality of what it takes to actually achieve them hits us. And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. We're drowning in to-do lists and self-doubt. It's so important to have those coping mechanisms in place for those moments, those strategies for hitting the reset button when you need to.
Totally. So, practically speaking, what are some healthy ways to deal with that sense of overwhelm?
Well, I think the first step is just acknowledging it, right? Don't try to power through it or pretend it's not there. Sometimes just naming the emotion. Like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. That in itself can take some of its power away. And then it's about breaking things down, right? Remember those stepping stones we talked about?
Right. Focusing on that next manageable step instead of the whole massive goal all at once.
Exactly. And, don't be afraid to reach out for support, whether it's a friend, a mentor, or a therapist. Sometimes just having someone to listen and offer encouragement can make the world a difference. Okay, are you ready to shift gears a little bit and get into something a little more, fun? This next section is all about bringing some creativity into the mix. It's called Creative Approaches to Goal Setting, and it's all about thinking outside the box, which I love. And this first prompt, prompt 2, immediately caught my eye. It asks, how can creativity enhance your goal-setting strategies? Because I don't know about you, but when I think goal setting, I usually think spreadsheets and to-do lists, not exactly the most, inspiring tools.
No, not at all. I'm all about those color-coded spreadsheets. But even I have to admit, they don't exactly spark joy, you know? So how do we tap into that more creative, playful side when it comes to setting goals?
That's such a good question. I think a lot of the traditional advice around goal setting it emphasizes logic and analysis, which is important. But there's this whole other side to it, too, and that's where things like intuition and imagination come in, the ability to connect seemingly unrelated ideas.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's like we're encouraged to use one part of our brain, that logical, analytical part, but there's this whole other part just waiting to be unleashed. So, like, how do we actually do that? How do we unlock that creative potential when it comes to goal setting?
Well, a good place to start is to just start asking yourself what-if questions. Like, what if I approach this goal from a totally different perspective? What if I challenge my assumptions about what's even possible? What if I gave myself permission to dream bigger, bolder, weirder?
I love that. Giving yourself permission to play, to experiment.
Exactly. And you never know, those unconventional approaches, those outside-the-box ideas, they might just lead to the most innovative and fulfilling outcomes.
Okay, this next prompt. Prompt 5 is one I've always been curious about. It asks, what role do imagination and visualization play in your goal setting? I've heard athletes use visualization all the time to improve their performance, but I've never really tried it myself. I guess I always thought it was a little, I don't know, hokey. But I'm totally willing to be proven wrong. What's the science behind it?
It's funny you should say that because I used to think the same thing.
Yeah.
But our brains are amazing, right? And they're actually not very good at distinguishing between what's real and what we vividly imagine. So when we repeatedly visualize ourselves achieving a goal, our brain actually starts creating neural pathways as if we were actually experiencing it in real life. And that, in turn, can boost our confidence, increase our motivation, and believe it or not, even improve our performance.
Wow. So it's not just wishful thinking. We're actually rewiring our brains for success. Okay, I'm sold. I'm definitely going to be trying that. Okay, last prompt in this section, and it's one of my favorites. What's an out-of-the-box reward you could give yourself for meeting a goal? I love this because it encourages us to think beyond the typical rewards, like a new gadget or a shopping spree. It's about finding rewards that truly resonate with us.
Right. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about aligning our goals with our values. Like, what truly motivates you at your core?
Yeah.
What would make you feel genuinely proud and fulfilled?
Yes, exactly. So instead of rewarding yourself with like a material thing, maybe it's an experience like a weekend getaway or tickets to a concert you've been wanting to see. Or maybe it's about giving back in some way, like volunteering for a cause you care about or donating to your favorite charity.
Those are great examples. It's about finding those rewards that are meaningful to you personally, that light you up inside, and that enhance your life in a way that a new pair of shoes just can't.
Okay, we have covered so much ground today. From the practicalities of setting smart goals to the power of visualization to the importance of celebrating those small wins along the way, we've explored a whole range of ideas to help you unlock your goal-setting potential. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure we tie it all together. So as we start to bring this deep dive to a close, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind from all these amazing journal prompts? So as we start to bring this deep dive to a close, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind from all these amazing journal prompts?
Going through these prompts, what really struck me is how much they emphasize that goal setting, it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's not like you make a to-do list and you're done. It's more about creating this ongoing conversation with yourself.
Ooh, I like that. An ongoing conversation with yourself. So it's about like checking in regularly, seeing how things are going, making adjustments as needed.
Exactly. And those prompts we talked about, like figuring out when you're most productive or how you deal with distractions, those are all about becoming a student of your own habits and tendencies.
That's such a good point. It's like that old saying, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. And that's really what this is all about, isn't it? Not just setting any old goals, but figuring out what works for you within that framework of goal setting.
Right. And I think that's really what Clara Penrose is getting at by framing these as journal prompts, not just like a list of tips or whatever. It's an invitation to go deeper, to get curious about yourself, to customize your approach over time.
It's about making it a habit, not just a one-time thing.
Love it. Okay, so before we go, I think it's only fitting that we leave our listeners with a little something to ponder, something inspired by all these fantastic prompts we've discussed today. What do you think? Okay, well, throughout our deep dive today, we've talked a lot about taking action, about breaking those big, sometimes overwhelming goals down into smaller, more manageable steps. Well,
Right.
I'm going to leave you with this. Think about one goal you've been putting off, maybe even feeling a little stuck on.
Mm.
Got it. Okay, now ask yourself, what's the very next concrete step I can take today to move toward it, even just a little bit? You don't have to have it all figured out, just that first step.
Ooh, I love that. Small steps, big impact. That's a wrap on this deep dive. Until next time, happy goal setting, everyone.